The loudest voice doesn't always lead. It's often the calm, focused presence in the room, the one who speaks little but moves with clear intention, that eventually holds the real control. In a world that never stops talking, there's something undeniably powerful about the person who knows when to stay quiet. They're not running from attention, they're sharpening their edge. They're observing, calculating, holding their fire until the moment truly matters. That's not weakness, that's genuine strength. And in today's world, that level of control is rare. We've been conditioned to believe we must constantly speak up, prove ourselves, and reveal everything we're working on. But the truth is, the more you explain, the more you lose your advantage. The more noise you create, the easier it becomes to miss the bigger picture. There's a reason the Stoics trained themselves to remain composed, to hold their thoughts, and to act only when the timing was right, not just to appear wise, but to succeed where others lost control. And that's exactly what we're exploring today, the strategy of silence. Not silence as avoidance, but silence as strength, as power, as the ultimate move in a noisy world obsessed with attention. If that sounds like something you need right now, stay with me. Because what you'll take from this isn't just motivation. It's a completely different way of showing up in the world. And if you're someone who values content that cuts through the noise and helps you develop real inner strength, do me one simple favor. Tap that subscribe button. It lets me know this message is reaching people who truly need it. Now let's begin. Have you ever noticed that the strongest presence in a room is rarely the loudest voice? It's the person who doesn't interrupt, who listens carefully, weighs the moment, waits, and when they finally speak, everyone leans in. That's not magic, and it's not mystery. It's mastery. Mastery of emotion, mastery of impulse, mastery of energy. In a time where many people are desperate to be heard, the person who chooses not to speak too soon becomes magnetic. They attract attention not by chasing it, but by deserving it. Silence signals control, not just control of the room, but control of the self. And that kind of control is rare. It tells others this person doesn't need to dominate the space because they already dominate themselves. Socrates once said, "The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms." But nothing can be defined clearly, especially yourself, if your thoughts are constantly spilling out before they're fully formed. Someone who restrains their words isn't hiding, they're thinking, they're refining. Most people mistake noise for value. They assume that if they talk more, they'll appear smarter, stronger, more significant. But noise rarely builds anything. It only fills the space where intention could have existed. Real power doesn't come from how much you say. It comes from the strength of what you choose to hold back. When you stop reacting from ego, stop explaining out of fear, stop justifying yourself simply to be accepted, you stop draining your energy. And what happens in that silence? You create space, not just around you, but inside you. And that space becomes a forge, a place where your thoughts sharpen, your presence grows stronger, and your actions begin to carry real weight. Carl Jung put it simply, your vision becomes clear only when you look into your own heart. Those who look outside merely dream. Those who look within awaken. Silence becomes the doorway to that awakening. It's where you begin separating your authentic self from the performative version that's always trying to be liked, noticed, or validated. We lose so much strength through unnecessary speech. Every time you talk just to fill the silence, just to feel included, just to appear important, you're spending energy that could have been invested in action. Sometimes you even reveal your plans before they've had time to fully form. You inflate them with attention before they've had space to breathe. Then when the moment comes to act, the motivation has already faded. Plato once said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." It's a sharp statement, but there's truth in it. When you operate from genuine inner security, you no longer feel the need to explain every move or narrate every goal. You allow your results to speak for you. You let your progress, steady, focused, undeniable, tell the story. There's something deeply empowering about moving in silence. You stop chasing applause and start pursuing depth. You learn to sit with your ideas before turning them into announcements. You wait until your instincts confirm what your ego might have tried to declare too early. And when you finally act, it's no longer about proving anything. It's simply who you've become. No fanfare, no dramatic speeches, just action, clean, strong, deliberate. And here's the beautiful part. When people eventually notice, you don't need to say, "I told you so." You don't even need to look back. You've already moved forward to the next challenge. That's how powerful silence becomes when you master it. It creates momentum that doesn't depend on anyone else's reaction. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But that kind of self-knowledge doesn't grow in noise. It grows in stillness, in reflection, in those moments where you no longer feel the need to defend or announce anything. Because when you're not busy performing, you begin listening. And when you begin listening, you start learning about people, about your environment, and most importantly, about yourself. That's when you stop being reactive and start becoming strategic. You stop saying, "Here's what I'm going to do," and begin asking what truly needs to be done. Then you do it quietly, fully, without wasting words. When you talk about a goal, your brain often gives you a sense of satisfaction, as if you've already achieved it. The applause arrives early, the reward feels real, and because you've already tasted that praise, the hunger to actually follow through begins to fade. The fire dims, not because you can't accomplish it, but because part of your mind already feels like you did. That's a trap more people fall into than they realize. Good intentions, loud announcements, but very little to show later. So instead of announcing your next move, build it quietly. Let your effort speak long before your voice does. When you do speak, make it meaningful. Speak only when it adds something real, something strong, something necessary. Otherwise, keep your focus sharp and your mouth closed. That is silence. And it's not weakness, it's strategy, it's your advantage. Think about a master chess player. They don't rush. They don't become emotional. They don't try to impress anyone. They study the board, observe the patterns, read the situation carefully. They wait. And then, with one quiet and precise move, they shift the entire game. Not because they moved first, but because they moved correctly. That's what silence gives you. Space to think clearly and space to move wisely. This level of discipline isn't passive. It's actually one of the most active mindsets you can carry. It takes strength to keep your ideas close, to work without applauding yourself, to build quietly while the world watches someone else. Silence isn't about sitting back. It's about being deeply involved with an energy that doesn't leak. It's like aiming carefully before firing instead of shooting wildly and hoping something hits. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." You cannot build anything meaningful if your energy is always pointed outward, toward other people's opinions, toward empty praise, toward the constant need to be seen. Silence is the shift inward. It's the place where you stop reacting and begin creating, where you stop trying to prove something and start actually building something real. When you no longer feel the urge to broadcast every thought or announce every intention, you regain control. Your focus sharpens. Your decisions become deliberate. You begin moving with purpose instead of impulse. And when the results finally appear, they're undeniable. Not because they were talked about, but because they were earned. Plato believed that the true measure of a person is what they do with power. And real power begins with self-control. Not only over your actions, but also over your words. What you reveal, what you hold back, and how much of yourself you expose before the work is finished. Every time you speak, you offer people a glimpse into your inner world. So why not wait until it's something truly worth sharing? This isn't about secrecy or suspicion. It's about conserving energy, maintaining focus, and staying directed. The quiet builder will always outlast the loud dreamer. While one person talks, the other lays brick after brick. While one is collecting likes, the other is gathering leverage. Silence protects your goals, sharpens your vision, and keeps your mind free from the clutter that comes from explaining too much or sharing too soon. You protect the seed while it's still growing. And when it finally blooms, when the thing you've been building begins to reveal itself, it doesn't need an introduction. People feel the weight of it. They sense that something meaningful has happened. And when they look back, they'll realize you never announced it at all. That's what makes silence so powerful. It's the discipline to move quietly, to aim without warning, to build without applause, and to succeed without needing to shout about it. Real power never begs for attention. It simply arrives and changes the situation. Many of the greatest innovators, leaders, athletes, and creators share a trait that isn't always obvious at first. They weren't built under bright lights. They weren't shaped by applause, headlines, or endless validation. They were forged in silence, during the quiet hours when no one was watching. While the world focused on someone else, they were working, practicing, refining their craft. They weren't waiting for permission. They were preparing for the moment opportunity would finally appear. And when it did, they didn't hesitate. They didn't panic or scramble to catch up. The work had already been done long before anyone noticed. But here's something most people overlook. The loudest noise doesn't always come from outside. It's not just opinions, distractions, or competition. Sometimes the real noise comes from inside your own mind, the voice that never seems to stop talking, the inner critic questioning every move, the doubter whispering, "What if you fail?" The overthinker inventing endless reasons to wait, to hesitate, to hold back. That internal voice has derailed more potential than almost any external obstacle. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's the danger of inner noise. It feels convincing. It disguises itself as logic, caution, even intelligence. But beneath the surface, it's often just fear wearing a clever mask. It's the part of you that's afraid of what might happen if you actually stepped into your full power. Because that version of you, the focused, disciplined, unstoppable version, doesn't need constant commentary. It doesn't need approval. It simply moves forward. Silence isn't just about holding your tongue in public. It's also about learning to stop arguing with yourself in private. It's refusing to get pulled into every mental spiral that begins with "what if?" Because when your mind is filled with that kind of noise, your vision becomes cloudy. You miss the signals. You overlook the moments that were meant for you. The mind becomes so busy preparing for imaginary problems that it can't recognize the real solutions quietly waiting nearby. When you begin quieting that internal chaos, something powerful happens. You start hearing what was always beneath the noise, your intuition, your gut instinct, the part of you that quietly knows what needs to be done and when. You begin noticing patterns, small signals others overlook. You recognize opportunities that seem invisible to a distracted mind. You start connecting ideas that, on the surface, seem unrelated but actually form a deeper pattern. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." And that is exactly what silence allows you to do. It clears the path towards self-awareness. It removes distractions long enough for you to hear your own mind clearly. Not the version shaped by pressure or anxiety, but the deeper version underneath it all, the calm, focused, clear-thinking self. You begin to realize that discipline isn't only about what you do externally, it's also about internal alignment. It's about knowing when to challenge a thought and when to let it pass. It's about recognizing when your mind is helping you and when it's holding you hostage. Having the strength to sit in silence without reaching for a screen, a distraction, or an easy escape, that's real mental toughness. Because that silence is where growth begins. It's where clarity forms. It's where strategy gets refined. Socrates believed that an unexamined life is not worth living. But you can't examine anything if you're constantly drowning out your own thoughts. You need space, stillness, a break in the noise so you can actually see. The deeper your silence becomes, the stronger your insight grows. Because clarity isn't loud, wisdom doesn't shout. The most important realizations in life rarely arrive with flashing lights or dramatic announcements. They appear quietly, almost like whispers. And if your mind is too noisy, you'll never hear them. Here's something worth asking yourself. When was the last time you truly sat alone in silence? No music, no scrolling, no distractions, just you, your thoughts, and the uncomfortable clarity that appears when you stop running. It's not easy. Most people avoid stillness because when the noise disappears, their insecurities rise to the surface. But that discomfort, that's your edge. If you can face it without flinching, you've developed a kind of strength that external noise can't shake. It's not about becoming cold or detached. It's about building composure that doesn't collapse under pressure. Being calm doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means your emotions no longer control you. That brief pause between stimulus and response, that's where your power lives. React less, respond better, because reaction is impulsive, response is intentional. And that small space between the two is where real influence begins, not through force, but through calm control. Leadership in its truest sense isn't about volume. It's not about always having the final word or speaking the most often. It's about presence. It's about the energy you bring into a space before you even say anything. The silent leader doesn't demand attention, they naturally command it. Not through noise, but through clarity, stability, and composure. People feel that energy. They lean closer, not because you raised your voice, but because when you finally speak, it's obvious you've taken the time to think first. That kind of influence can't be faked. It's built quietly, in restraint, in observation, in reading the room, in understanding the atmosphere before jumping into the fire. Aristotle once said, "He who cannot be a good follower cannot be a good leader." And to follow well, you must first learn to listen well. The quiet leader listens not simply to respond, but to truly understand. They notice what others overlook. They recognize the spaces others miss because everyone else was too busy trying to be heard. That is the essence of silence used as strategy, not only as personal discipline, but as a powerful tool in the real world. Picture yourself walking into a negotiation. The room is thick with tension, agendas, and competing egos. Everyone is waiting for their moment to prove something. But you remain calm. You listen. You allow silence to work on your behalf. Slowly, people begin filling that silence themselves, revealing more than they originally intended. And when the moment finally arrives, you speak. Not excessively, just enough. But every word lands with weight. That's precision over volume. That's how you shift the entire dynamic without ever raising your voice. And this principle doesn't only apply to business or meetings, it applies to your personal goals, your projects, and your growth. Think about how much time is wasted chasing things that look like progress, but add nothing meaningful to your path. The endless scrolling, the comparisons, the habit of overcommitting. It feels like movement, but it's not momentum. Not every effort is effective. Not every action is aligned with where you truly want to go. Plato once said, "The excessive increase of anything often causes a reaction in the opposite direction." And he was right. Too much scattered energy eventually leads to burnout, confusion, and regret. That's why silence matters. It forces you to choose. It forces you to prioritize and subtract. Instead of trying to be everywhere and do everything, the silent strategist moves intentionally. They say no more often. They go deeper instead of wider. And that depth, that focused, quiet depth, is what produces results that cannot be ignored, even if no one saw the work happening behind the scenes. Much of success in life isn't about speed, it's about direction. And direction only becomes clear when you slow down long enough to ask yourself what actually matters right now. Not what's trending, not what everyone else is chasing, just what is true for you, what moves your mission forward, what aligns with the person you're becoming. Silence clears the fog. It reminds you that you don't have to respond to every stimulus, jump on every opportunity, or explain yourself every time someone misunderstands you. You simply keep building, quietly and relentlessly, with your awareness sharp and your energy protected. Silence teaches something noise never can, the value of subtraction. In a world constantly pushing you toward more, silence pulls you back toward less, but better. It sharpens your attention and shows you exactly where your energy is leaking. Because every time you say yes to something meaningless, something shallow or misaligned, you are automatically saying no to something that truly matters, something real, something that might have changed your life if you had protected your time, your focus, and your energy. That's why true focus is so rare, not because people don't want it, but because they're too distracted to realize what they're sacrificing. In a culture overloaded with endless options, the person who can strip life down to what truly counts has the advantage. That advantage doesn't come from knowing everything, it comes from knowing what to ignore. But subtraction isn't only important when you're feeling confident, it's even more important when doubt begins creeping in, when you're standing in that uncertain space where the next step isn't obvious and clarity feels distant. Those moments reveal who has trained themselves to sit with silence and who immediately runs for distraction. Because silence in those moments isn't empty, it's a mirror. It reflects the version of you that's been buried beneath layers of distraction. It removes the filters, no applause, no outside opinions, just you facing the truth of who you are and who you aren't. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." But silence doesn't let you escape. It holds you there until you're honest with yourself. And that isn't weakness. That's the starting point of real strength. Clarity doesn't come from adding more input. It comes from slowing down, from cutting through the noise and finally hearing your own voice without distortion. And here's something many people overlook. Even while you're moving forward, silence still plays a role. Not everything loud is productive. Not every action needs to be announced. You can be active and still remain rooted in quiet awareness. In fact, the most effective actions are often born out of stillness. That's where strategy develops. That's where timing sharpens. That's where your decisions become deliberate rather than reactive. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And one of the greatest forms of power is the ability to pause, to act with precision. Not simply to move, but to understand why you're moving and where it will lead. You don't build a meaningful life by chasing every shiny distraction. You build it by knowing what truly deserves your pursuit and having the discipline to stay focused while the world tries to pull your attention in 10 different directions. That's the beauty of silence. It slows the world down just enough for you to become honest with yourself. And within that honesty, you find alignment. Once that alignment appears, your actions finally begin to carry meaning. They're no longer just habits or reactions. They become conscious decisions you stand behind, movements that reflect who you've chosen to be rather than who circumstances pressured you into becoming. Because greatness doesn't come from intensity alone. It's not about being the loudest, the fastest, or the most aggressive. It comes from clarity, from understanding where you're going and why. And clarity only shows itself when you stop trying to outrun the noise and start listening beneath it. So even while you're taking action, while you're building, creating, and pushing forward, carry silence with you. Not as emptiness, but as awareness, as depth, as that steady internal compass reminding you that you don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be constantly seen to make progress. You simply need clarity. Clarity about what matters, clarity about who you are, and clarity about where you're headed. Some people move just to prove they're moving. They rush into action not because it's the right moment, but because stillness makes them uncomfortable. They confuse activity with progress and noise with meaning. But there is another kind of power, the power of strategic patience, waiting not from fear, but from wisdom. Remaining still not because you're unsure, but because you understand the moment hasn't arrived yet. And when that moment finally comes, you don't hesitate. You don't stumble. You move decisively. You strike with precision. That is a completely different level of discipline. Knowing how to act is one thing, but knowing when to act and having the patience to wait for that moment without collapsing under pressure, that's real strength. Because when your actions come from stillness, your movement becomes clean. There's no hesitation, no need to justify it to anyone. You're not searching for approval. You're not asking for permission. You're simply ready. And when the moment arrives, you commit fully. No hesitation, no second guessing, no extra commentary to soften the impact or gather applause. You move with total force, clear intention, and unwavering conviction. That kind of action, rooted in silence and refined through discipline, doesn't just make a dent. It leaves a mark. It lands with weight. And more importantly, it lasts. That's the kind of impact most people miss because they're too busy chasing attention. They want to be seen, heard, and celebrated. But here's the truth. Fame is loud and temporary. It needs constant noise to stay alive. It feeds on attention, and when the spotlight shifts, the relevance fades with it. But legacy is different. Legacy doesn't beg to be noticed. It grows quietly while the world is distracted. It develops in the background, during early mornings and late nights when no one is watching. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And that awakening, the one that fuels meaningful work, rarely happens under bright lights. It happens in silence, when you're alone with your thoughts, when you keep building without praise, when you continue showing up day after day, even when nobody is recognizing the effort. That's where legacy truly begins. Aristotle believed that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not a single act but a habit. Legacy is built from those habits, from that quiet consistency, from the moments that never make headlines but slowly create the foundation of something unshakable, something you can be proud of, not because the world noticed it, but because it carried real meaning. And when you begin living that way, focused, patient, and grounded, you stop worrying about being remembered. Instead, you start focusing on being real, being useful, being honest in what you build. That's the kind of work that survives trends, outlives hype, and continues speaking long after you're gone. Because it was never about being known. It was about creating something worth knowing. The most powerful individuals aren't remembered for how loudly they spoke. They're remembered for the impact of what they quietly built. Their influence wasn't created through noise. It was carved into the world through consistent, disciplined effort that never demanded attention, but eventually earned deep respect. They didn't perform for the crowd, they prepared for the moment. And when that moment arrived, they didn't need to announce themselves. The world noticed anyway. So maybe it's time to flip the script. What would your life look like if you stopped explaining and started executing? If you didn't feel the need to share every plan, every goal, every move, because you were too busy making them real? What if you spent less time reacting and more time observing? Not watching from fear or hesitation, but with the calm awareness of someone gathering patterns, information, and insight. Because sometimes the best move isn't the loud one, it's the informed one, the move made at the right time, with the right knowledge and the right intention behind it. Plato once said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." There's something liberating about realizing you don't have to say much. Not because you lack ideas, but because your focus is somewhere more valuable, on the work, on the vision, on building something that doesn't require constant explanation to matter. When you stop trying to prove yourself, you create space to prepare, quietly, patiently, powerfully. You begin playing the long game, and that long game changes everything. Because it's no longer driven by impulse, emotion, or outside noise. It's built from clarity, and that kind of clarity grows in silence. Not the silence that hides, but the silence that sharpens. Let your work speak. Let your decisions represent you. Let your consistency become your legacy. You don't need a megaphone when your results carry weight. In fact, the louder you try to be, the less room there is for people to truly feel your presence. When you move with intention, people sense it without needing an explanation. Carl Jung believed that a man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never truly overcome them. Silence is often where that inner fire is faced, not in the chaos of performance, but in the quiet of preparation. That's where character is refined. That's where depth is formed. And once you've walked through that process, once you've learned how to stay steady in the storm, you become the kind of person who doesn't flinch when pressure arrives. In a world filled with noise, be the signal. Be the one who speaks less but says more. The one who doesn't posture yet still commands the room. The one who doesn't need the last word because their actions have already finished the conversation. Always remember, the deepest waters make the least noise. The strongest people rarely broadcast their strength. The loudest voice might grab attention, but it rarely leads. It's the quiet one, the patient one, the person who observes, listens, and executes with precision who ultimately shapes the future. Because silence, when practiced with discipline and intention, isn't just a personality trait, it's a strategy. One that wins battles without raising a voice. One that prepares in the shadows and rises when the moment truly matters. One that builds things that remain long after the noise fades. That's the kind of power worth chasing. Not the kind that needs to be seen to be real, but the kind that works quietly and transforms everything it touches. In the end, it isn't about how loud your voice is. It's about how deep your impact runs. Let silence shape you. Let your actions speak on your behalf. And when the time comes, let your results be undeniable. If this message stirred something in you, there's more waiting ahead. Watch one of the videos on your screen now. It might be exactly what you need next.